In the winter of 1892, a carriage pulled away from the grand Harrogate Manor, filled with laughter, silk, and jewels. Inside sat a mother and her 2 daughters on their way to the most exclusive ball of the decade. They were warm, they were wealthy, and they were confident that their secrets were safe. But behind them, locked in a freezing, unheated outbuilding in the middle of a blizzard, they left a young woman named Adeline to die. They thought she was nobody. They thought she would freeze in silence. But they made one fatal mistake. They didn't know that the most powerful man in England, the Duke of Wolverton, wasn't at the ball waiting for them. He was on his horse, riding through the storm, coming for her. And when he found out what they had done, his revenge would shake high society to its core. The winter of 1892 was recorded in the parish records of North Yorkshire as the Great White Silence. It was a cold so biting that it reportedly snapped the branches off the ancient oak trees lining the drive of Harrogate Manor. But for Adeline Sterling, the cold inside the house was far worse than the frost on the windows. Adeline was 21, though her hands looked older, reddened and chapped from scrubbing the stone floors of the manor's scullery. She was not a servant by birth, but by circumstance. Her father, a gentle scholar named Arthur Sterling, had died 3 years prior, leaving Adeline in the care of his distant cousin, Lady Catherine Pembroke. It was intended to be a guardianship. It became a prison. Lady Catherine was a woman whose beauty was as hard and brittle as porcelain. She had 2 daughters, Arabella and Louisa, who were currently in the drawing-room screaming with delight. "It is here! It is finally here!" Arabella shrieked, waving a piece of heavy, cream-coloured parchment in the air. Adeline, who was kneeling by the fireplace, trying to coax a dying ember into a flame to warm the room for them, kept her head down. She knew better than to look up. "Read it again, Mother," Louisa demanded, twirling an address that cost more than Adeline's father had earned in a year. Lady Catherine snatched the invitation. Her voice dripped with triumph. "His Grace Sebastian St. Clair, the Duke of Wolverton, requests the pleasure of the Pembroke family's company at the winter solstice ball at Wolverton Abbey." Adeline froze. The tongs in her hand clattered against the grate. Sebastian. The name hit her like a physical blow. 5 years ago, before the death of her father, she had known a Sebastian. He had been a second son, then a brooding young officer, staying at the neighbouring estate during the summer. They had shared books, walks in the rain, and a promise whispered under a willow tree. A promise that he would return for her once he had made his fortune in the king's army. But he had vanished. No letters, no word. And now he was the Duke of Wolverton, one of the wealthiest men in the British Empire. "You dropped something, girl," Lady Catherine said, her voice cutting through Adeline's memory. Adeline quickly picked up the tongs. "I apologize, my lady. The fire is difficult today." "Leave it," Catherine snapped. "You are sucking the warmth from the room with your hovering. Go to the sewing room. Arabella's green silk needs to be taken in at the waist. If it is not finished by tonight, you will not eat." "But my lady," Adeline whispered, risking a glance at the woman. "The sewing room. The window is broken. It is below freezing in there." Lady Catherine smiled a slow, cruel curving of her lips. "Then you had best sew quickly to keep your blood moving, hadn't you?" Arabella and Louisa giggled, covering their mouths with lace handkerchiefs. They knew the truth. They knew that Adeline was actually the rightful heir to a significant trust fund left by her grandmother, a trust Lady Catherine had managed to hide by declaring Adeline mentally unfit and keeping her isolated as a pathetic, poor relation. As long as Adeline remained unmarried and broken, the Pembrokes lived in luxury. Adeline stood up, wiping the soot from her apron. She didn't cry. She had stopped crying 2 years ago. "Yes, my lady." She walked out of the warmth of the drawing room and into the icy corridor. As she climbed the stairs to the freezing attic where the sewing machine waited, she allowed herself one dangerous thought. He is back. Sebastian is back. But he was a duke now, and she was a ghost in a grey dress invisible to the world. Or so she thought. By 6 o'clock that evening, the storm had turned violent. The wind howled around the eaves of Harrowgate Manor like a wounded animal. Inside the master suite, the scene was one of chaotic opulence. Maids were running back and forth with hot irons and perfumes. Adeline had been working for 6 hours straight. Her fingers were numb, bleeding slightly where the needle had slipped, but Arabella's dress was perfect. "It's tight," Arabella complained, as Adeline laced the corset. "Pull it tighter, you dim-witted creature. The Duke must see my figure." "If I pull it tighter, you will faint, Miss Arabella," Adeline said softly. "Do as you are told," Lady Catherine barked from the doorway. She was resplendent in dark velvet and sapphires. Adeline pulled. Arabella gasped, then smirked, admiring herself in the mirror. "There. Perfection. Perhaps the Duke will propose tonight. Imagine, Mother, I shall be a duchess." "And you—" Louisa sneered, looking at Adeline's ragged reflection in the glass. "You will always be nothing." Then disaster struck. As Louisa turned her arm, knocked over a crystal flacon of heavy rose perfume. It shattered on the floor, splashing onto the hem of Arabella's gown. The silence was deafening. "You clumsy fool!" Arabella screamed, but she wasn't looking at Louisa. She was looking at Adeline. "I didn't do it," Adeline said, her eyes widening. "It was Louisa! Liar!" Lady Catherine stepped forward and slapped Adeline across the face. The sound cracked through the room. Adeline stumbled back, clutching her cheek. "You did this on purpose," Catherine hissed, her eyes manic. "You are jealous. You wanted to ruin her night because you know you are destined to rot in this house." "Mother, look," Louisa pointed to the stain. "It's barely visible. It will dry." "It is the principle," Catherine shouted. She turned to Adeline, her face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "You need a lesson in gratitude, Adeline. You think you have it hard. You think the cold sewing room was punishment." Catherine grabbed Adeline by the arm, her grip bruising. "To the ice house." Adeline's blood ran cold. The ice house was a stone storage shed at the edge of the garden used to store blocks of ice cut from the lake. It was effectively a freezer. "No, please," Adeline begged, finding her voice. "It's a blizzard outside. I'll freeze to death. Please, Catherine." "That is Lady Catherine to you," the older woman spat. They dragged her downstairs. The servants turned their heads, too terrified of losing their positions to intervene. The butler, a kind man named Mr. Henderson, looked as though he wanted to speak, but Catherine shot him a withering glare. "Open the back door." The wind slammed against them as the door opened. Snow swirled into the hallway. Adeline was thrown out into the drifts. She was wearing only her thin grey work dress and worn slippers. No coat, no shawl. "You can think about your jealousy in the dark," Catherine shouted over the wind. "We shall return in the morning. Perhaps then you will appreciate the warmth of the scullery." "You can't leave me," Adeline screamed, the wind tearing the words from her throat. "I will die out here." Lady Catherine just laughed. It was a hollow, terrible sound. "Don't be dramatic, Adeline. Hardship builds character." The heavy oak door slammed shut, then the distinct sound of the iron bolt sliding home. Adeline pounded on the door. "Please, please!" inside the Pembrokes didn't look back. They adjusted their shawls, sprayed more perfume to cover the scent of the incident, and walked out the front door to their waiting carriage. As the carriage rolled down the drive, Arabella looked out the window at the snow-covered grounds. "Do you think she'll be all right, Mother?" she asked, though she didn't sound concerned. "She is a sterling," Catherine said, checking her reflection in a small hand mirror. "They are like weeds, hard to kill. Forget her. Tonight is about the Duke." Back at the manor, Adeline realized no one was coming. The house was dark. The servants had been dismissed to their quarters in the village for the night to save on coal. She was alone. She trudged through the knee-deep snow toward the ice house purely because it had walls that might block the wind. Her teeth were chattering so hard, her jaw ached. Her hands were already turning a terrifying shade of blue. She curled up in the corner of the stone shed, amongst the sawdust and blocks of ice. She wrapped her arms around herself, closing her eyes. "Sebastian," she thought, a single tear freezing on her cheek. "You promised." As her consciousness began to fade into the dangerous, sleepy warmth of hypothermia, she didn't hear the thunder of hooves approaching the main gate. She didn't see the black stallion tearing up the snowy drive, ridden by a man who looked less like a duke and more like a god of war. Sebastian St. Clair had not gone to his own ball. He had read a report from his private investigator that morning, a report detailing the stolen inheritance of one Adeline Sterling. He wasn't coming to dance. He was coming to burn Harrogate Manor to the ground if he had to. The iron gates of Harrogate Manor were rusted shut, a symbol of the neglect that had befallen the estate since Arthur Sterling's death. But Sebastian St. Clair did not stop for rust. He did not stop for iron. With a shout that was lost to the howling wind, he spurred his stallion, a massive beast named Titan, toward the side perimeter where the stone wall had crumbled years ago, a path he remembered from a summer 5 years past. He cleared the wall, the horse's hooves sinking deep into the fresh snowdrifts. As he galloped up the long, winding drive, the house loomed out of the darkness. It was completely dark. Not a single candle flickered in the windows. It looked like a tomb. Sebastian dismounted before the horse had fully stopped his boots, hitting the frozen gravel with a heavy crunch. He hammered on the front door. "Adeline!" he roared. "Catherine, open this door!" Silence answered him. Only the wind whistling through the cracks in the masonry. He didn't wait. He stepped back, raised his boot, and kicked the heavy oak door just below the lock. The wood splintered, but held. He kicked again, putting the full force of his anger behind it. With a deafening crack, the door flew open, banging against the interior wall. Sebastian strode into the foyer. The air inside was stale and freezing, smelling of old wax and damp wool. He pulled a lantern from his saddlebag, lit it with trembling hands, and held it high. "Adeline!" He moved through the house like a phantom. He checked the drawing room empty, save for the dying embers of a fire. He checked the kitchen cold. Then he saw it. On the floor of the hallway near the back entrance lay a single, dainty slipper. It was worn grey and threadbare. He picked it up. It was freezing to the touch. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He noticed a trail of wet snow leading from the back door into the hallway, but it hadn't melted. The door had been opened recently. He burst out the back door, the lantern swinging wildly. The blizzard was blinding now, a wall of white. He squinted against the stinging ice, scanning the ground. The snow was filling them in fast, but he saw drag marks, cool, not footprints. Drag marks. They led toward the garden, toward the ice house. "No," he whispered, the horror of it gripping his throat. "Dear God, no." He ran. He ran faster than he had ever run on any battlefield in the colonies. He reached the stone structure, the heavy wooden door bolted from the outside. The malice required to slide that bolt home made his blood boil. He tore the bolt back and threw the door open. The darkness inside was absolute. He stepped in, raising the lantern. The light danced over blocks of sawdust-covered ice, stacked high against the walls. And there in the far corner, curled into a ball so tight, she looked like a child, was Adeline. She wasn't moving. "Adeline." He dropped the lantern in the sawdust, dangerous, but he didn't care and fell to his knees beside her. She was blue. Her skin was the color of marble. Ice crystals had formed on her eyelashes. He ripped off his heavy fur-lined greatcoat and wrapped it around her, pulling her limp body into his arms. She was stiff, her breathing so shallow he had to press his ear to her frozen lips to hear the faint, erratic hitch of air. "I'm here," he choked out, his voice breaking. "I'm here, Addie. I came back." She didn't respond. Her eyes remained closed, her face slack. He knew he couldn't keep her here, and he couldn't leave her in the manor. It was too cold, and there were no servants to boil water or tend to the fires. He had to get her to Wolverton. He lifted her. She weighed nothing. The realization of how starved she must be fueled a new dark rage inside him. Lady Catherine Pembroke hadn't just neglected her. She had been slowly erasing her from existence. He carried her out into the storm, shielding her face with his body. He managed to mount Titan while holding her, cradling her against his chest, wrapping his own body around hers to transfer whatever heat he had. "Ride, Titan," he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Ride like the devil is chasing us." The journey back to Wolverton Abbey usually took an hour. Sebastian made it in 30 minutes. Unlike the dark silence of Harrogate, Wolverton Abbey was ablaze with light. Hundreds of carriages lined the drive. Music a waltz by Strauss drifted out from the ballroom windows, mingling with the laughter of the aristocracy. Sebastian did not go to the front entrance. He rode around to the stables, shouting for his grooms before he even halted. "Get the physician!" he bellowed, as he slid off the horse, Adeline still wrapped in his coat. "Get Dr. Blackwood. Now!" The stable-master, an old man named Thomas, took one look at the bundle in the Duke's arms and the look on his master's face and ran toward the house without a word. Sebastian kicked open the side door to the kitchens, startling the staff who were busy preparing trays of canapes. "Master Sebastian," the head cook gasped, dropping a tray of silver. "Clear the way," Sebastian shouted, ignoring the mess. "Hot water, blankets, brandy. Bring them to the master suite immediately." He didn't care about propriety. He didn't care that the guests might see him. He stormed up the back stairs, carrying Adeline to his own private chambers, the warmest room in the house. He laid her on the massive four-poster bed. The velvet quilt was crimson, a stark contrast to her deathly pale skin. He began to chafe her hands, rubbing life back into them. "Don't you dare, he commanded, tears finally spilling onto his cheeks. "You waited 5 years. Don't you dare give up now." The door burst open. Dr. Blackwood, a man of science and discretion who had served the St. Clair family for decades, rushed in, followed by 3 maids carrying steaming basins of water. "Your Grace, what has happened?" Blackwood asked, already reaching for Adeline's wrist. "Hypothermia," Sebastian said, stepping back to give the doctor room, though he couldn't take his eyes off her. She was locked in an ice house, for hours. Dr. Blackwood's face grew grave. He listened to her heart. He lifted her eyelids. Her pulse is thready. We need to warm her slowly. If we do it too fast, her heart will stop. He looked at Sebastian. You must leave, Your Grace. The maids need to strip her of these wet clothes and get her into warm linens. I am not leaving her, Sebastian growled. You must, Blackwood said firmly. You are covered in snow yourself. You are of no use to her shivering. Go. Change. I will do everything in my power. Sebastian hesitated. He looked at Adeline one last time. She looked so fragile, like a snowdrop crushed by a boot. Save her, Sebastian whispered. Save her, and I will give you anything you ask. I will try, Blackwood said. But Your Grace, you should prepare yourself. She is very weak. Sebastian turned and walked out of the room. He stood in the hallway, the sound of the waltz from the ballroom downstairs drifting up to him. The music sounded obscene. People were laughing. They were drinking champagne. And among them were the women who had done this. He walked to his dressing room. He stripped off his wet riding clothes. He washed the soot and snow from his face. He dressed in his formal evening wear, a black tailcoat, a crisp white shirt, his family crest pinned to his lapel. He looked in the mirror. The man staring back was not the romantic boy who had left 5 years ago. This was the Duke of Wolverton, and he was about to go to war. The grand ballroom of Wolverton Abbey was a masterpiece of Victorian excess. 12 crystal chandeliers, each holding 100 candles, cast a golden glow over the 300 guests. The air was thick with the scent of expensive French perfume beeswax and hothouse flowers. In the center of the room, Lady Catherine Pembroke held court. She was radiant in sapphire blue silk, a necklace of diamonds paste, though she told everyone they were heirlooms glittering at her throat. Beside her, Arabella and Louisa were preening like peacocks. Arabella wore the green silk dress Adeline had nearly bled to finish, and Louisa was flirting aggressively with a young viscount. It is such a shame the Duke has been delayed, Catherine said loudly to a circle of eager listeners, including the local vicar's wife and the Mayor of York. But one must expect these things. Men of such importance have weighty matters to attend to. Do you know the Duke well, Lady Catherine? The Mayor asked. Catherine laughed, a tinkling, practiced sound. Oh, intimately. Our families have been connected for generations. Why, Sebastian practically grew up at Harrowgate. He was always fond of my dear Arabella. Arabella blushed on cue, snapping her fan open. Mother, you mustn't tell tales. It is true, Catherine insisted. I suspect tonight might be a very special announcement. She winked, implying an unfoldment was imminent. The crowd murmured with appreciation. The Pembrokes were the envy of the room. And how is your niece, Mrs. Gable, the vicar's wife, asked innocently. The quiet one, Adeline. Catherine's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. Oh, poor Adeline. We decided it was best she stay behind. Is she ill? Worse, I'm afraid. Catherine lowered her voice to a theatrical whisper. Her mind, it has been deteriorating. She becomes violent. We simply couldn't risk her causing a scene at such a prestigious event. We left her in the care of a nurse, sedated for her own safety. How tragic, the listeners sighed. You are a saint to care for her, Lady Catherine. One does what one must for family, Catherine said, sipping her champagne. At that moment, the heavy double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. The music faltered. The chatter died away. Sebastian St. Clair stood at the top of the stairs. He was imposing, his broad shoulders filling the frame of the doorway. His face was unreadable, a mask of aristocratic stone. But his eyes, grey and piercing, swept the room like a predator scanning a herd. "The Duke," someone whispered. Sebastian began to descend the stairs. He moved with a slow, predatory grace. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide path leading straight to where the Pembrokes were standing. Catherine's heart leaped. "He is coming to us. He is coming to open the ball with Arabella." "Straighten your spine," she hissed to Arabella. "Here he comes." Sebastian reached the bottom of the stairs. He stopped 3 feet from them. The silence in the room was absolute. Every eye was on this tableau. Catherine curtsied low. "Your Grace, we were beginning to worry." Sebastian didn't bow. He didn't smile. He looked at Catherine, then at Arabella, then at Louisa. He looked at the green dress. He looked at the jewels. "Lady Catherine," Sebastian said. His voice was calm, smooth, and carried to the corners of the silent room. "I trust your journey here was pleasant." "Oh, delightful, Your Grace," Catherine gushed, rising from her curtsy. "Though the storm is quite dreadful outside, we are just so grateful for the warmth of your hospitality." "The warmth," Sebastian repeated. "Yes, warmth is a precious commodity tonight, isn't it?" Catherine blinked, confused by his tone, but pressing on. "Indeed, my daughters and I were just admiring the decorations. Arabella was hoping you might save a dance for her." Arabella stepped forward, batting her eyelashes. "It would be an honor, Your Grace." Sebastian looked at her outstretched hand, but did not take it. "I'm afraid I'm not in the mood for dancing, Miss Pembroke. I have spent the last hour engaged in a rather distinct activity." "Oh," Catherine asked, her smile faltering slightly. "And what was that?" "Thawing a frozen corpse," Sebastian said. The words dropped into the room like stones. A few guests gasped. Catherine went pale. I beg your pardon," she stammered. Sebastian took a step closer, towering over her. The menace radiating from him was palpable now. "I found something on my estate tonight, Lady Catherine. Or rather, I found someone. A young woman, left in an unheated stone shed, in a blizzard, wearing nothing but a scullery maid's rags." The colour drained from Arabella's face. Louisa took a step back, bumping into a waiter. I don't know what you are talking about," Catherine said, her voice rising in pitch. "Surely some beggar woman wandered onto your grounds." "She was not on my grounds." Sebastian interrupted, his voice rising to a thunderous boom that echoed off the painted ceiling. "She was on yours. I found her in the ice house at Harrogate Manor." The crowd began to whisper frantically. "And do you know the most curious thing?" Sebastian continued, his eyes boring into Catherine's soul. "When I asked you where your niece was 5 minutes ago, you told this room she was at home, sedated with a nurse." "She is," Catherine cried, desperation creeping in. "She must have escaped. She is mad. I told you. She wanders." "She did not wander," Sebastian roared. "The door was bolted from the outside." The accusation hung in the air. The guests recoiled from the Pembrokes as if they had the plague. "You left her there," Sebastian said, dropping his voice to a lethal hiss. "You left Adeline Sterling, the daughter of a gentleman, the woman I intend to make my wife, to freeze to death while you drank my champagne." The shockwave hit the room. "Wife. Wife," Arabella squeaked. "But she is a servant. She is a nobody." "She is worth 10 of you." Sebastian spat. He turned to the crowd, addressing the stunned nobility of Yorkshire. Let it be known that the Pembrokes are no longer welcome in my home. Furthermore, I have already sent a telegram to my solicitors in London. An audit will be conducted on the Sterling Trust Fund, first thing in the morning. Catherine's knees gave way. She grabbed a chair to stop herself from falling. The trust fund. If he looked at the books, he would see the embezzlement. He would see the theft. He would see everything. "Sebastian, please," Catherine whispered, all her arrogance gone. "It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. We were teaching her a lesson." "You taught me a lesson," Sebastian said coldly. "You taught me that evil wears silk." He turned to his head of security, a burly man standing by the doors. "Mr. Thorne, escort these women off my property. They can walk home." "Walk," Louisa shrieked. "In the blizzard, we'll die." Sebastian looked at them over his shoulder, his expression devoid of mercy. "Then you had best walk quickly to keep your blood moving. Isn't that what you told her?" He turned his back on them. "Get them out of my sight." As the guards moved forward to seize the screaming women, Sebastian didn't watch. He was already walking back up the stairs, 2 at a time. The public execution was over. Now he had to go back to the battle that really mattered. He had to see if Adeline was still breathing. The silence in the master suite of Wolverton Abbey was heavier than the blizzard raging outside. The only sounds were the crackling of the logs in the oversized limestone fireplace and the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, a sound that felt to Sebastian like a countdown. It had been 4 hours since he had carried Adeline from the ice house, 4 hours since he had thrown the Pembrokes out into the snow. But the satisfaction of his revenge had evaporated the moment he closed the bedroom door. Now there was only fear. Dr. Blackwood, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, wiped sweat from his brow. "The shivering has stopped, Your Grace." Sebastian, who had been sitting in a wing-back chair by the bed, gripping the armrests until his knuckles were white, shot up. "Is that good? Does that mean she is warm?" Blackwood hesitated, exchanging a look with the head nurse, Mrs. Gable. "It means her body has exhausted its energy reserves. She is in a critical window. She is no longer fighting the cold. She has succumbed to it. Now we must see if her heart is strong enough to wake up." Sebastian walked to the bedside. Adeline looked painfully small in the center of his massive bed. Her skin, which had been blue, was now a translucent, ghostly white. Her breathing was so shallow it barely lifted the heavy velvet quilt. He reached out and took her hand. It was no longer icy, but it wasn't warm. It felt like cool porcelain. "She has scars," Sebastian murmured, his voice thick with suppressed rage. He turned Adeline's hand over, tracing the rough red lines across her palms and fingers, evidence of lye soap scrubbing brushes and hard labor. "When I knew her 5 years ago, she played the piano. Her hands were soft. They did this to her. Malnutrition is a concern as well," Dr. Blackwood noted, packing his bag. "She is significantly underweight. It is a miracle she survived even an hour in that shed, let alone 3. She has a will of iron." "She had to," Sebastian whispered. "She was alone." The doctor left instructions for the nurse to administer drops of warm brandy and broth every hour if she could swallow, and then departed. Sebastian dismissed the maids. He wanted to be alone with her. He pulled the chair closer. The storm rattled the window panes, a reminder of the death she had narrowly escaped. "I wrote to you," Sebastian said softly to the unconscious woman. Every week for the first year. Then every month. I told you about India. I told you about the promotion. I told you I was coming back. Adeline didn't stir. I thought you had forgotten me. He confessed, the words hurting his throat. When the letters went unanswered, I thought you had married someone else. I thought you were happy. God forgive me. I stayed away because I was too proud to see you with another man. He leaned his forehead against her hand. If I had known, if I had just ridden over that hill one day, sooner. Around 300 a.m. the fever set in. It was a violent reaction to the rapid change in temperature. Adeline began to thrash. Her head whipped from side to side on the pillow. She started to mumble, her voice raspy and terrified. No. Please. The cold. Shh, you're safe, Sebastian soothed, dipping a cloth in cool water and pressing it to her burning forehead. Don't lock the door, she whimpered, tears leaking from her closed eyes. Catherine, please. I'll be good. I'll sew the dress. The plea shattered Sebastian's heart. He climbed onto the bed, sitting beside her, and pulled her into his arms, rocking her gently. Catherine is gone. She can never hurt you again. You are at Wolverton. You are with Sebastian. Sebastian! Her eyes flew open. They were glassy, unfocused, seeing things that weren't there. He isn't coming. He forgot. I never forgot, he said fiercely, smoothing her damp hair back. I am here. Look at me, Addie. She blinked her gaze, drifting around the opulent room, the gold-framed paintings, the silk canopy, the roaring fire. Then her eyes landed on his face. Recognition fought with delirium. You look older, she whispered. I am. He smiled sadly, and apparently a great deal more foolish. Am I dead? She asked. Is this heaven? It's warm. It's not heaven. It's my home. And you are going to live. She looked at him for a long moment, and then her eyes rolled back as she fainted from exhaustion. But her breathing was deeper now. The hitch was gone. Sebastian didn't sleep. He sat guard as the sun began to rise over the snow-covered estate, turning the white world to gold. He watched the color slowly return to her cheeks, a faint, pale pink that looked like victory. At 8:00 a.m. there was a quiet knock at the door. It was Mr. Thorne, his head of security, accompanied by a sharp-faced man in a pinstripe suit. Sebastian gently laid Adeline's hand down and walked to the door, stepping into the hallway. Quietly, he ordered. Your Grace, Thorne said. This is Mr. Percival from the firm of Chambers and Halloway. You asked for the records immediately. Mr. Percival bowed. We rode through the night, Your Grace. We have accessed the probate records regarding the estate of Arthur Sterling. Tell me, Sebastian said, his eyes hard. It is worse than you suspected, the lawyer said, opening a leather folio. Arthur Sterling left a trust of £60,000 for his daughter, Sebastian hissed. £60,000 was a fortune. It was enough to buy a small county. Lady Catherine Pembroke was named executor until Adeline turned 21. Percival continued. However, there is a clause. If Adeline were declared mentally incompetent or morally unfit, control of the trust would remain with the guardian indefinitely. So they declared her mad, Sebastian concluded. Precisely. We found forged documents from a corrupt physician in York, a Dr. Vane, stating that Miss Sterling suffers from hysteria and hallucinations. Using that, Lady Catherine has been draining the account. She has spent nearly £20,000 in 3 years on jewellery travel and gambling debts. And the rest? The remaining £40,000 is still sitting in the Bank of England. But here is the key. Your Grace, the documents require Adeline's signature to release the quarterly allowance. If she was locked in a cellar, how was she signing? Forgery, Sebastian said. Clumsy forgery, Percival agreed. We have the withdrawal slips. The handwriting doesn't match Miss Sterling's school records. It matches Arabella Pembroke's. Sebastian smiled a cold, predatory smile. So we have theft, fraud, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder. And now forgery. We have enough to send them to Newgate Prison for the rest of their natural lives, Percival confirmed. Shall I summon the constables? Not yet, Sebastian said, looking back at the bedroom door. Adeline deserves to give the order. Let them sit in their cold house for a few days. Let them wonder. Fear is a better punishment than prison, at least for now. It took 3 days for Adeline to be strong enough to sit up. For those 3 days, Sebastian was her constant shadow. He fed her broth with a silver spoon. He read to her from the books they had loved 5 years ago, Tennyson and Keats. He never mentioned the Pembrokes. He wanted to build a wall of safety around her first. On the 4th morning, the winter sun was shining brightly. Adeline was sitting in a velvet armchair by the window, wearing a dressing gown of soft blue cashmere that Sebastian had ordered from London. She was watching the gardeners clear the snow from the drive. She looked healthier, though still fragile. "Penny for your thoughts," Sebastian asked, entering the room with a tray of tea. Adeline turned. Her eyes were clear now, a striking hazel green. "I was thinking about the laundry," she said quietly. Sebastian set the tray down, frowning. "The laundry. It's Tuesday," she said simply. "Tuesday was laundry day at Harrogate. I would be boiling the sheets in the copper vats right now. My hands would be blistered." She looked down at her healing hands. "It feels strange to just sit." "You never have to touch a copper vat again," Sebastian said, pouring the tea. "I burned those grey rags you were wearing, by the way. It gave me immense satisfaction." Adeline smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She looked down at her lap. "Sebastian, I have to leave." The cup rattled in Sebastian's saucer. He set it down carefully. "Leave why?" "Because I cannot stay here," she said, her voice trembling. "I have no money. I have no position. I am a scandal waiting to happen. You are a duke. People are already talking. I cannot ruin your reputation." "My reputation?" Sebastian laughed, a genuine hearty sound. "Adeline, I am the Duke of Wolverton. I am the reputation. I dictate what is acceptable." "But I have nothing," she insisted, tears welling up. "Catherine took everything. My father's house, his money. I am a pauper." Sebastian walked over to her. He knelt on one knee, not in a proposal yet, but to be at her eye level. He took a heavy envelope from his pocket. "You are not a pauper, Adeline. You are one of the wealthiest women in Yorkshire." He handed her the envelope. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a bank book from the Bank of England, stamped with her name, showing a balance of £40,000. "What is this?" she gasped. "Your father's legacy," Sebastian explained gently. "Catherine stole 1/3 of it, which I will force her to repay down to the last farthing, even if I have to sell Harrogate stone by stone. But this is yours. It was always yours." Adeline stared at the numbers. The realization washed over her. She hadn't been poor. She hadn't been a burden. She had been the victim of a monstrous lie. "She knew," Adeline whispered. The whole time I was scrubbing her floors. She knew I could have bought the manor. She knew, and she hated you for it. Adeline dropped the book and covered her face with her hands, sobbing. It wasn't sadness. It was relief mixed with a profound sense of betrayal. Sebastian let her cry. He held her hands, anchoring her. When the sobs subsided, she wiped her face. I want them to pay, she said, her voice hard for the first time. They will, Sebastian promised. But there is one more thing we need to discuss, the matter of the letters. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a stack of yellowed envelopes. They were tied with a faded ribbon. I found these in Catherine's desk when my men seized her papers, Sebastian said. They are your letters to me, and mine to you. Adeline touched the stack. She kept them, like trophies, Sebastian said. She wanted to make sure we never found each other. He took a deep breath, but she failed. He stood up, then took her hands and pulled her gently to her feet. Adeline, he said, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made her knees weak. 5 years ago, under the willow tree, I asked you to wait for me. I had nothing to offer you then, but a soldier's pay and a second son's name. It was all I wanted, she whispered. Now, he continued, looking deep into her eyes, I have titles, I have estates, I have power, but none of it means anything if I have to walk through these halls alone. You are the only one who ever saw me not the title. He reached into his pocket one last time. This time he pulled out a ring. It wasn't a gaudy diamond. It was a sapphire, dark and deep as the ocean surrounded by small white diamonds. It was his mother's ring. I don't want to save you because I pity you, Sebastian said. I saved you because I cannot live without you. Adeline Sterling, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my duchess? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for the cold? Adeline looked at the ring, then at the man who had ridden through a blizzard to find her. The ghosts of the last 3 years, the hunger, the cold, the cruelty, seemed to dissolve in the warmth of the room. Yes, she whispered. I didn't hear you, he teased gently. Yes, she cried, throwing her arms around his neck. Yes, Sebastian. He caught her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. For the first time in years, laughter echoed in the room. But as they embraced, a dark reality still loomed outside the gates of Wolverton Abbey. The Pembrokes were still free. The law had not yet been served. Tomorrow, Sebastian said, sliding the ring onto her finger, where it fit perfectly. Tomorrow we go to the magistrate. Tomorrow we finish this. Adeline looked at the sapphire, glittering on her hand. It looked like armor. No, she said, a new strength in her voice. Not the magistrate, not yet. Sebastian raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? The winter solstice season isn't over. Adeline said, her eyes narrowing. There is the New Year's gala at the Assembly Rooms in York next week. Catherine will be there. She will try to spin a web of lies to save her reputation. She will tell everyone I died or went mad. She probably will, Sebastian agreed. Then I want to walk in, Adeline said. I want to walk in on your arm, wearing the family jewels, and I want to see her face when she realizes she has lost. I don't want a quiet, legal victory, Sebastian. I want them to see me shine. Sebastian grinned. It was a wicked, admiring grin. As you wish, my love, he said. Let's give them a show. The York Assembly Rooms were the beating heart of high society in the north of England, and the New Year's Eve gala was the event of the season. The ballroom was a sea of pastel silks, ostrich feathers, and the glitter of family jewels. Under the light of 1,000 candles, the orchestra played a lively quadrille. But beneath the music, the rumour mill was grinding furiously. Lady Catherine Pembroke stood near the punch bowl, her fan fluttering like the wing of a nervous bird. She was pale, despite the rouge on her cheeks. Since the night of the solstice ball, the Pembrokes had been social pariahs. Invitations had been rescinded. Callers had stopped coming. Tonight was her last desperate gamble. She had to convince the world that the Duke was a liar, or at least that he had been mistaken. "It is such a tragedy," Catherine whispered to Mrs. Montgomery, the wife of a wealthy industrialist. "My poor niece. The madness finally consumed her. She ran away into the storm that night. We fear the worst." She dabbed at a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. "The Duke was confused. Grief does strange things to a man." Arabella and Louisa stood beside her, looking less like peacocks and more like cornered rats. They wore their finest dresses, but their eyes darted around the room, terrified that Sebastian would appear. "Do you think he will come?" Louisa hissed. "He wouldn't dare!" Catherine snapped through her hand shook. "He has no proof, just the ravings of a hysterical girl. If we hold our heads high, this will all blow over." Suddenly the music stopped. It didn't fade. It cut off abruptly as the conductor lowered his baton. A hush swept over the room, starting from the entrance and rippling outward like a wave. The heavy mahogany doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. The master of ceremonies, usually a man of booming confidence, looked down at the card in his hand, then back up his eyes wide with shock. He cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly. "His Grace, the Duke of Wolverton, and his betrothed Miss Adeline Sterling." The silence that followed was so profound you could hear the wax dripping from the chandeliers. Sebastian walked in first. He was resplendent in formal evening dress, his medals gleaming on his chest, looking every inch the powerful peer of the realm. But no one was looking at him. All eyes were on Adeline. She did not look like a victim. She did not look like a servant. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue velvet that shimmered like the night sky. Around her neck sat the Wolverton sapphires, a necklace of legendary value that had not been worn in public for 20 years. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style, crowned with a diamond tiara. But it was her face that captivated the room. She held her head high, her gaze cool and steady. She walked with the natural grace of a queen. Catherine dropped her glass. It shattered on the parquet floor, the sound cracking through the silence like a gunshot. Adeline and Sebastian walked slowly down the center of the room. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide avenue that led directly to where the Pembrokes stood, frozen, amidst the shards of broken glass. They stopped 5 paces away. "Adeline," Catherine whispered, her face draining of all blood. You are alive." "Disappointed, Aunt?" Adeline asked. Her voice was not loud, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried to the gallery. "It is difficult to freeze to death when one has the warmth of the truth." Catherine laughed nervously, a high-pitched, manic sound. She stepped forward, arms outstretched, trying to embrace the narrative she had spun. "Oh, thank heavens! My prayers have been answered. My poor, confused niece has returned home." She reached for Adeline. Adeline did not flinch. She simply raised one gloved hand, palm out. "Do not touch me." Catherine froze. "Adeline, please. The guests are watching. Let us go home and discuss this." "I have no home with you," Adeline said coldly. And we have nothing to discuss. I believe you know my solicitor, Mr. Percival." From behind the crowd, the sharp-faced lawyer stepped forward, flanked by 2 uniformed constables and the Chief Magistrate of York. The colour left Arabella's face completely. She grabbed Louisa's arm to steady herself. "What is the meaning of this?" Catherine demanded, trying to summon her old imperiousness. "How dare you bring police into a ballroom?" "The law goes where the criminals are," Sebastian said, his voice deep and final. Mr. Percival opened a scroll. "Lady Catherine Pembroke, you are hereby charged with the embezzlement of the Sterling Trust, totaling £20,000. You are charged with the forgery of bank documents." A gasp went through the crowd. Theft was bad. Forgery was a hanging offence in the eyes of society. "Lies!" Catherine shrieked. "He is lying. That girl is insane. And—" The magistrate stepped forward, his face grim. "You are charged with the attempted murder of Adeline Sterling by locking her in a freezing outbuilding with intent to cause death by exposure." "No!" Arabella cried out, bursting into tears. "I didn't do it. It was Mother. Mother told us to leave her. I wanted to go back." "Shut up, you fool!" Catherine slapped Arabella, but the damage was done. The confession had been heard by 300 witnesses. The constables moved in. They took Catherine by the arms. She struggled, her dignity completely gone, kicking and screaming like a wild animal. "I am a lady." "You cannot touch me." "Adeline, tell them. Tell them I took you in when you had nothing." Adeline took a step closer, looking down at the woman who had tormented her for 3 years. "You took me in to make me a servant in my own house," Adeline said softly. "You tried to erase me, but you forgot one thing, Catherine." "What?" Catherine hissed, her eyes filled with hate. "Winter eventually ends." The constables dragged Catherine, Arabella, and Louisa out of the ballroom. Their screams echoed in the hallway long after the doors had closed. The room remained silent for a long moment. Then Sebastian turned to the orchestra conductor and nodded. "Play," he commanded. The music started a slow, romantic waltz. Sebastian turned to Adeline and bowed low. "May I have this dance, Your Grace?" Adeline smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. She placed her hand in his. "You may, Sebastian." As they swept onto the floor, the crowd didn't just watch. They began to applaud. It started as a ripple and grew into a thunderous ovation. It was an acknowledgement of justice of survival and of a love that had conquered the cold. Adeline rested her head against Sebastian's shoulder as they spun. "Is it over?" she whispered. "The cold is over," Sebastian promised, holding her tight. "From now on, there is only warmth." Outside, the snow continued to fall on the streets of York, burying the tracks of the police carriage. But inside, under the golden lights, the future was just beginning. And so the great white silence of 1892 ended not with a tragedy, but with a triumph. Lady Catherine and her daughters were found guilty and sentenced to prison, losing every penny of their ill-gotten gains. Adeline and Sebastian were married 3 weeks later, in a ceremony that people talked about for decades. They used a portion of Adeline's restored fortune to build a heated orphanage in York, ensuring that no one else would ever be left out in the cold. This story reminds us that while evil may thrive in the shadows, it cannot survive the light of truth. Adeline's resilience and Sebastian's loyalty prove that karma has a way of finding everyone. Sometimes it just arrives on a black horse in the middle of a blizzard. What would you have done if you were Adeline? Would you have forgiven your aunt, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more dramatic tales from history coming up. Thanks for watching and stay warm out there.